Good to see everyone on our webinar today. I think we're about to get started. So at this point, feel free to continue to add to the chat as you'd like to, but let's officially get started with our webinar today. If you're attending right now, you are here for the Rethink IAQ, how to blend science and cleaning to improve indoor air quality in facilities. And indoor air quality might be a topic that you don't think about every day. You probably think about the dirty floors, the restrooms, all the things that you see that are dirty, but indoor air quality, as you're going to see in this next hour, is a very important topic, and we have some experts today to share with you their expertise. We'll get into official introductions in a moment, but you can see on the screen we have Dr. Gavin McGregor-Skinner, Todd Stoneking, and Ron Segura. And we do want to thank our sponsors of our webinar, those that make this possible and bringing this to you, Dickies, Molecule, and Tomy as well. So we have 3 sponsors today, and we thank them for their support. My name is Jeff Cross. I'm the ISSA Media Director, and I want to mention that we have support on our webinar. Behind the scenes, we have Martha Schmidt. She's the virtual events producer for ISSA, and we have Kathleen Misovic, who's the CMM editor. So it's not just me or the panelists. We also have support behind the scenes as well. I want to talk just a moment about Cleaning and Maintenance Management Magazine. And as I mentioned, Kathleen's the lead editor on that publication. It's the industry's leading media brand. We bring you the content you need for your facilities and your companies as building service contractors and others who are involved in the cleaning industry as well. So if you're not a subscriber at this time, be sure to take care of that when this webinar is over. Go to cmmonline.com. You can sign up for our magazine, whether it's print or digital. We have both versions. Our CMM Daily News, and our other events and publications as well. We do other newsletters, and we cover other topics that you probably want to take advantage of for your company or organization. Before we officially get started with our content, just want to mention that we do have a Q&A feature. So you see that at the bottom of the portal. And we also have a chat feature. So if you want to put your questions for our panelists there, you can do so. And we will keep an eye on that as we go through this. So if we're talking about a specific topic and we see something coming into the chat or the Q&A portal and it's appropriate to address it, we'll do it then. You're automatically muted, so no need to worry about that. You can talk all you want, but be sure to listen and get what you can out of this webinar. You will receive a copy of this recording. So if you've registered for this webinar, of course, if you're not here, you're not hearing me, but no matter what, if you registered, you're going to get a copy of this via email. So that will come in a few days once Martha renders the recording. You'll be able to have a copy of that and use that and maybe share with others in your organization. You can also watch a presentation of this on cmmonline.com. So whether you get the email or not, it's going to be there for everyone to see. We do have one sponsor message to start with. We'll have another one later on, but this is one of our sponsors, and the information they bring to you is to help you with your organization. And that's our commercial to start with. Want to mention this for everyone on our webinar today to submit your questions in the Q&A portal. A few of you came in after I said that the first time, so we're just going to repeat that. So we want to answer your questions, what you want to know about when it comes to indoor air quality. Also, the chat feature, you can utilize that as well. Today's panelists, they can speak up anytime they like during this presentation. We are going to all share the same time. So we have Dr. Gavin McGregor-Skinner. He's the Senior Director of the Global Biorisk Advisory Council. We call it GBAC, a division of ISSA. So Gavin, welcome to our webinar today. Glad to have you. Gavin's going to say something.
No, thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
Gavin and I do a lot of videos together, so we just have a good time. Todd Stone King, he's the supervisor at the University of Utah, Facility Operations Custodial Department. Todd, welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Ron Segura, the president of Segura and Associates. Ron will represent mostly the BSC, the building service contractor side. So any of you out there that do cleaning as a business, Ron is your man to get some information from. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for the invitation to be here.
Absolutely. Let's do our chat question for the day. What I want to do is kind of just take the temperature of the group here, those on our webinar. You think about indoor air quality issues. And as I said at the beginning, you might not focus on that as much as dirty bathrooms, cleaning floors, and all of that, the other daily tasks that just have to be handled. Indoor air quality might be something that you know is important, but you're not really sure what to do with that. So put your thoughts in the chat if you'd like to. Put in the chat what you are concerned with. Is it filtration, monitoring, contaminants? Are you not sure what really is the most important for your facility? Any thoughts there? We see Doug Hoffman put in monitoring. Russell says contaminants. Yeah, monitoring. We're going to cover these topics. And if you can't think of a specific issue with your organization, and it comes up later on, just go ahead and toss it in the chat. We do have Kathleen watching the chat to make sure we don't miss anything. So filtration, monitoring, all kinds of topics there. So we will cover those and make sure that you go away with some tangible information you can use for your organization. Okay, so let's get started and have a conversation with our panelists. The first topic is, why do we need to rethink indoor air quality? And I think that's an important topic because indoor air quality is important. It's something that we've talked about. We know that everyone wants the best indoor air quality for their facility, but why do we need to rethink the approach now? And Gavin, why don't we start with you on that?
Yeah, sure, Jeff. Hi, everyone. I think what's really important, I'm just looking at the chat right now, Jeff, and we're seeing things like filtration. We're seeing things like monitoring. Well, I want to start the conversation today. Well, let's think about what's the first thing you would do if you ever found yourself in the unfortunate position where you discovered, say, an inch of water in a room. Well, the first thing you'd try to do is find the source and turn it off. And then you get to cleaning. And the same logic applies to air quality in your building. You know, we saw the COVID-19 pandemic bring indoor air quality back on the table, back as a critical issue for us to discuss. But the same logic applies to air indoor quality in our building. That the very first step in maintaining good air quality is to control indoor sources. And you have to turn off the source of the indoor air pollutants that you've got. If you control the source, then there's no exposure. And then there's no chance of adverse health effects. And in even what we're seeing in the chat today and what I'm hearing in the discussion is no, let's not do the monitoring that's required for the source. Let's go straight back to the filtration systems and spend lots and lots of money without actually knowing what we're trying to fix.
Good information, Gavin. Appreciate that. Todd, when you think about this, when you think about rethink indoor air quality and what you do with your university, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing I think about is, what are we doing with the dirt and the pollutants that are actually in the air, in the building? I mean, walk into a building, you see dust on things. Where's that coming from? How's it getting into the building? Or is it being recirculated? How are we removing that? We don't want to be using feather dusters and putting it back into the air. I don't know how many times I've walked into a building after somebody's vacuumed an entrance carpet, and literally you can see the dust floating around in the air. How are we going to mitigate that and stop that from happening? It's a lot more than just the building's filtration system. It's us stopping it before it becomes an issue. And that way, if we've stopped it, we've used filtration on our vacuums, on our equipment, then basically we're not creating another issue that has to be dealt with.
Todd, I think I have an issue in my house because when the sun comes in my windows, I can see that dust, but no feather dusters here. I have 0 feather dusters in my home. So good points. Ron, from a you can speak to facilities as well, but I know building service contractors is your specialty. What do you have to share from that angle as they do their work?
Well, I think we're coming out of a pandemic, and the way that we approach, or a BSC would approach, the cleaning of a facility um, is very important, because the customer wants to know right now, what are you going to do to contribute to the safety of our facility, particularly with the reoccupation, more and more people coming. We use microfiber, we use a lot of dust control programs, but now it's even more important to look at the indoor air quality, because people have been sitting home for 2.5 years watching all the news stations. They know what sanitation is, the difference between that and disinfection. And so the occupants of the building, they're going to be coming in, and now those invisible people at night really are people that are going to be contributing to whether we feel safe in our building or not. So I think now's a good time to talk about indoor air quality and how it has been impacted by COVID-19.
Yes, and we'll talk about this in more detail. But Rick sent a message that clear information to share with occupants of the room to relieve them of their concerns. I think that's important, that communication factor as well. And sometimes we wonder, what do we tell them? Is that the fact we're cleaning enough, or does it take more than that? So we want to keep that in mind as well. Thank you all for the comments coming into the chat. Lots of good points there. Let's move on to our next slide and talk about this. Where are we at in the industry compared to the pre-pandemic era? And Todd, let's start with you on this, because you're in a facility each and every day. Maybe you can talk about what things were like before, and then when the pandemic hit, and your own work.
So looking at our facilities, in some ways, we're not actually as good as before the pandemic, because during the pandemic, it was, we got to disinfect everything. We've got to spray everything. And so we were actually creating indoor air quality issues by putting disinfectants heavier into the air. As the pandemic has went on, we've gotten a little smarter. We've moved a lot more to putting your disinfectants on rags and wiping things down. But since we've realized this pandemic was not caused by something that contacts, it's aerial, that we've actually changed the way that we've dealt with this. And more of it's just trying to stop it from moving the air around and the pollutants around. Obviously, we have filtration systems in buildings, but that's only part of what we do. It's removing the stuff, not just sliding it around like I mentioned before. A lot of microfibers were being used now, which will take away most bacteria without disinfectants, but then using disinfectants that are less harmful, and even using products that aren't certified as a disinfectant anymore, but we know those products are effective at killing our bacteria and viruses. So that's kind of one of the ways we've moved as we've came out of the pandemic.
That's a topic we're going to get into, the momentum factor, because you're right, during the pandemic, everyone was forced and they embraced some practices that might be slowly eroding. And we want to think about how to keep that going, because people will be healthier for it. Ron, let's go to you, and then we'll ask Gavin to wrap it up. What do you think about this? Thinking of contractors and the work they're doing and comparing the two, pre-pandemic to now.
Well, first of all, as an industry, we have always been a changing industry. If you look back 20, 30, 40 years ago, the way that we cleaned compared to the way we've done now, if you go back to 2004, when green cleaning was first coming into play, it was another change. So we're used to that type of change. But I think with this pandemic, I don't think, I know, from a customer perspective, their vision and the way that they look at a building service contractor is totally different. They look to them as the experts. And I think the reason they do that is because when the pandemic hit, there were those companies that quickly adapted and started to develop disinfection programs, which led to a lack of equipment. Many of them were back ordered. But what they've done now from a customer perspective and I help a lot of them in putting together their RFPs, one of the things they look at now is what type of disinfection program do you have? And now, when in the past they may not have listened to the building service contractor wanting to implement some indoor air quality programs, they're looking at them differently now. We're being looked at as experts because they've demonstrated that in the last 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Good points. I see in the chat we have more information. Doug Hoffman with Normie. Hello, Doug. I know you can't speak back, but good to have you on. Talks about monitoring. We'll get into the monitoring part of our webinar as well. And Carlos makes an interesting comment. Gavin, maybe you could just consider that as well in your thoughts. He says, after the pandemic, building occupants have more concern regarding indoor air quality. That's a good thing. What do we do with that?
Yeah, I like what Carlos has just said in the chat there, Jeff. I live in Washington, D.C. For me, that's a good thing. I was recently at a U.S. Department of Education meeting. They said there's 131,000 K-12 schools in the U.S. I don't know this stuff, but they said there's 131,000. They also talked about there's 140 million homes in the US. We know we spend probably more than 90% of our time throughout any given day in the built environment. And what they also mentioned was that the federal government appropriated billions of dollars. That's with a B, Jeff. Billions of dollars in federal funding was available for air quality. And that was like, how do you do an indoor air quality action plan? What are some of the solutions that you can come up with improving indoor air quality? And at the meeting that I went to only just recently last week, only 15% of the billions of dollars have been spent. And so what the government has now done is they've now extended for another 12 months that spending of that money. And I think that's really important that for us, both at ISSA, but also many of the people on this call today, is to come up with those solutions. And the real exciting thing for us right now, Jeff, is that we have devices, these are like medical diagnostic testing, robust, rigorous standard devices about the size of a smoke detector that can actually do air sampling in any indoor built environment, homes, cars, schools, planes, and hotels. And I think that we're in a situation now where we're unmatched. This has never happened before, where we can actually measure and get, and measure what our quality of air is. We could look at carbon dioxide, temperature, humidity, particles at all different sizes, carbon monoxide, and also those volatile organic compounds whenever we want. The challenge we have, though, Jeff, right now is, what do we do? What's the solution? I can see in the chat a lot of people are running to the filtration and the outdoor air stuff. Well, maybe, but I'm going to go back to, let's find out what the source is inside of air pollutants and see whether we can't solve that first. So we're at an exciting period for the industry. I would like to finish though, Jeff, but what we really need now is more training, more education, and I'd like to do more certification of indoor air quality professionals so that we can go back to the government and say, hey, we have the capacity, we have the people to help you spend the billions of dollars that you couldn't spend this year, and we'll spend it for you next year.
Of course we will. Yeah. Thank you, Gavin. Again, more thoughts in the chat, some good ones. We're going to keep some of this for the question and answer part. I know, April, you asked a really good question about air fresheners, so we're going to address that. I made a note on a paper so we won't forget it as well. And Doug Hoffman, we're going to talk about ISSA show and your monitoring of air quality there. So folks can look forward to those comments. I was impressed with that process as well, because we think about cleaning, indoor air quality, but how do you know? How do you know the air is healthy or not? So we'll get into that, but let's move on. Let's move on to our next thought. And improving the quality of the air we breathe. What does the science tell us? And Gavin, the word science is all about you. So let's start with you on this one. And then Todd and Ron, you can add if you'd like to.
Yeah, Jeff, again, if we don't measure it, we don't detect it, we can't fix it. And that's sort of, how do we look at both the indoor and outdoor pollutants that come into our built environment? I'm looking at the chat at the same time. I'm going to apologize to both April and Kathleen. I'm sorry that we're just a bunch of guys on this right now. We need to be talking about perfume and scents and candles and that sort of stuff. And I'm really, we will cover that. But I think for chemicals, Jeff, like volatile organic compounds, it's important that we choose things like non-VOC paints, formaldehyde-free products. It means avoiding those scented sprays and even those cleaning agents with high VOC or high volatile organic compound contents, because we know that VOCs are potentially harmful. We know they can react with ground level ozone and generate formaldehyde and other particles and other products. And so it's really important of it. So we go back to the science is telling now we can measure this stuff in real time. And so what we want to do, we want to understand that there is a need to control the infiltration of outdoor pollutants. Again, those that penetrate from the ground, for example, like radon and even some of the VOCs. There's probably over 70 plus volatile organic compounds and other pollutants that we're concerned about. So it's really important that we look at the metrics, we look at the measures, and when we look at the different standards right now, unfortunately, Jeff, there's a bit of variation there. That'll all come back down and be condensed to hopefully someone will be able to walk into a hotel, an airport, a school, even their own home and go, oh, here's the indoor air quality. I know I can do it on my iPhone. If I grab my iPhone right now and go to the weather app, I get an outdoor air quality indication and measure for living here in Washington, D.C. So when I go running, Jeff, I look at the outdoor air quality and I decide, do I go outdoor and run, or do I go down to the basement and work out, where I have no idea what the air quality is in my basement right now? And I think we're going to see more dashboards, more metrics like that, where we can just walk into especially public spaces and be able to determine based on our own personal situation what that risk is for, say, what the air quality is today and how it might affect me personally as an individual.
So you don't know about the indoor quality of your basement, but are your kids' gym shoes down there? I guess that's the question.
Well, yeah, they are, Jeff. But I've got 6 air quality monitors up here in the attic where I spend most of my time working.
Good for you, Gavin. You're preaching. You're doing what you're preaching. So let's go to you, Todd, and thinking about your facilities. What would you add to this thought?
So, like Gavin's saying, we got to kind of locate the source. Where is it coming from? I look at this from a custodial side and a cleaning side. Some years ago, it's been about 10 years ago when I took over my position of dealing with equipment for the university, we were using various different vacuums. One of those vacuums we looked at had no filtration on it, and we had some actual testing done on it. They told us that vacuum was putting out as much pollutants as an open construction site. That became very concerning to us. We started looking at what filtration needs to be used on vacuums, So we've stopped the source now by putting a filter in it, or a HEPA filter, which now cuts down our pollutions to smaller microns anyhow. Doesn't get rid of everything, but it takes the big pollutants out of the air. So that's kind of one of the things I think about. I also think about, you walk into a restroom, what's in that restroom? What's making that restroom smell? I mean, that is a pollutant that's going back into the air. I believe we'll talk a little more about the actual processes and things in a minute, so I won't go into that. But, all the type of things that I think about from my side as we are doing our work to keep our facilities clean.
Good information. And Ron, anything to add? Maybe it's from a contractor viewpoint looking in.
Yeah, Gavin had mentioned about the all the devices that are coming out to be able to monitor the indoor air quality. And I think it's really important for a BSC to be in communication with their contact, their customer contact, and find out what type of devices they're using, and making sure that they're getting some feedback in regards to areas of concern. And that way they're able to look at their own area of responsibility and to make sure that what they're doing is not contributing in a negative way.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you. Let's move to our next topic, which is one we've already talked about a bit, so we might repeat a little bit of this. But looking at our next slide, we want to think about indoor air monitoring and testing. What are our options? And I'm gonna go ahead and mention it, Gavin. When we were at ISSA show, Doug Hoffman with Normie, he and Lance were like, let's test the air. And so I believe it was an app I got on my phone, or maybe it was a link. Maybe Doug, you could put in the chat if you'd like how I saw those numbers, but I saw a report that showed that the indoor air quality at the show, QR code. Thank you, Doug. Doug's listening, so glad to have you on. QR code to tell you how the quality of the air was. And it was nice to see with all those people inside the building, the air quality was good. But Gavin, let's start with you on this. And anything more to add about the options we have? I know you just love the thought that you can look at your phone and tell what the outside air is like. What about the inside?
I want to make a strong recommendation, Jeff. And that strong recommendation is I want us to develop a culture, a best practice of continuously monitoring air quality in real time. It's not there yet. I was hoping I was more optimistic that, throughout the last couple of years, especially, but also other things that have happened, forest fires with particles and all sorts of things, that we would be more into monitoring air quality in real time. But as well as doing that, you need to supplement it with some of the industrial hygiene assessment methods that we have. So throughout the year, you need to do targeted analysis for the 70 plus volatile organic compounds, the VOCs and other air pollutants. And so I think there's really, for all of us, there's some significant market segments, opportunities for us in the businesses that we do and the work that we do. Again, air quality assessments in any indoor space. Hit the planes, hit the trains, go to the buses. And I know when I jumped in a rental car the other day, I nearly choked to death because, gosh, Jeff, I think they must have used some sort of citrus oil to make it smell good, to try to confuse me that it was clean, and they didn't know what my background was. And I said, I'm not taking that car. I nearly died. It was overwhelming what that smell was in there, because they wanted it to be, to appear to be cleaned, and it wasn't. So let's look at some of the significant market opportunities that we have. Air quality assessment, air quality management. Let's not overcomplicate that. Let's help, especially with the federal government now wanting all the schools in the country to have an actionable indoor air quality management plan. And let's make those operational. Let's make them doable and make them real. Again, go back to the remediation. We've got so many experts with mold, our residential mold experts, our allergen experts. Work with them and see how we can then expand it to other indoor air pollutants, and then come up with solutions that are affordable, sustainable, and understand that in some situations we can control the source of indoor air pollution, and there has to be solutions when we can't control the source. And what I see a lot of facilities, Jeff, they're going to the ventilation filtration solutions first, which requires expertise. It's expensive, without focusing back, I might be able to control the source of air pollutants before I jump into mechanically ventilated systems and MERV particle filters and carbon-based filters, that sort of stuff, which is a whole different area. So, that sort of systematic approach is so needed right now.
Yes, it is. Lisa Greenfield sent a chat that fragrances and perfumes are poison. She has upped our game on how to view. Gavin, you mentioned the rental car and the scent. I agree with you. Those scents are just terrible things. Although I don't want to bash those that make sense. They have their place, but it doesn't mean it's clean or healthy. We need to think about that. So Todd, let's talk to you about in your facility, when you think about air monitoring and testing. I don't know if you have a system set up, or you mentioned you can actually see in the air the dust, but what are your thoughts there?
So at our facility, for us on the custodial side, most of what we see is rather visual or olfactory as we smell it. However, if we're noticing lots of, smells in a building, and we have a lot of labs, we have anything from cadaver labs to research labs on various different other stuff. If there's something that seems out of whack or is not like we think it is, we contact our environmental health and safety people, and they will send in a hygienist who will then do the testing and make sure the building is, safe to occupy. And they do go around on a very regular basis and monitor our buildings, and certain areas of campus even higher than other areas of campus. So, that's kind of how we deal with it. But, you know, for the custodial side, it's, oh, I see dirt in the air. I see dust. I smell something. That's really how most of us deal with that on my side.
Yeah, but I like the fact that if there's an issue, you have someone to turn to figure it out.
Yes,
important.
It's very nice to have people, that's what they do, and that's all they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Showing up in their suits and their gear and testing equipment and all that. Tell you how things are. Ron, go ahead. What do you have to add to this? You think about contractors and taking care of buildings. Any experience with the monitoring or knowing what the indoor air quality is like?
No, I think it was well covered by Gavin and Todd, but I just emphasize again that a BSC would certainly want to communicate well and find out what system is being used by their customer, if any.
Okay, appreciate that. And Doug just mentioned in the chat that some of the most dangerous pollutants have no smell. Good point, Doug. But boy, lots of commentary in the chat about the perfumes and how they're used and maybe overused. So we want to be careful with that, using those. We have a sponsor message, so let's go ahead and move into that. This is our next sponsor commercial.
Do you hear that? That's the sound of powerful destruction. The sound of Molecule's air purifying Pico technology, safely dismantling pollen, mold, viruses, bacteria, and chemicals at a molecular level, leaving behind crisp, clean air. Anyone can filter. We destroy. Find the Molecule air purifier for you at molecule.com.
We thank our sponsor for that message. And as we move on, let's start with you, Ron, because I have a feeling you know a little bit about cleaning equipment. What about the choice of equipment, maintenance of it, or the amount of it on the impact for IAQ?
Yeah, and I think now more than ever, there's so many different options to a BSC. You know, if you think back in the last 10 years, there's been so much advancement to that. And I think from a customer perspective and looking at companies that would clean a facility, one of the things they look at is the technology, the type of equipment. You know, now we're talking about robotics now, but, you know, it used to be, for instance, that a big complaint, people would have equipment, but they really weren't trained properly on how to use it. Talking particularly about carpet cleaning machines. People would come in and have a carpet done, and it would be wet for days, or a lot of different problems. So my suggestion to BSCs is to work closely with their distributor and the manufacturer and emphasize the training as it pertains to indoor air quality. When you're going after a piece of equipment, really understand how it's going to impact your customer in a positive way, how it's going to impact the people that are going to be using the equipment in a positive way. But I think now more than ever, there are so many different options that we have. And I think one of the biggest advancements, I think, that really impacts indoor air quality is the vacuums and the filtration. And again, whatever you're using, always make sure that that manufacturer, the training programs they have, that you use them to train your people. Because one of the biggest things that I have seen is when a person doesn't know how to use a backpack vacuum properly, or really make the maximum use out of the way the vacuum works, is you're spinning wheels. So now's the time to build a good training team with your vendor, with your manufacturer, and let your customer know that your people are trained, because that helps them in the confidence level, and it helps them to feel that you're really doing something to maintain that indoor air quality at a healthy level.
Yeah, very good points. Thank you. And Todd, I have a feeling that you've got more than one or two vacuums around your facility or auto scrubbers. What do you have to add to this?
Most certainly, I would agree with Ron 100%. You know, make sure you have equipment that does a good job. You know, work with distributors, do research on your equipment. Just don't go out and buy the cheapest vacuum you can get, because It's a vacuum. Make sure you got one that uses filtration. Make sure filters are maintained. Make sure your people are trained in how to use that equipment. You know, if they don't know how to use it, they're going to be doing it wrong. They're not going to be replacing filters. Same on scrubbers. I mean, whether you have a scrubber, you know, you want to make sure that stuff is being picked up and going into the water, not being pushed into the air. If you have big vacuums, we use riding vacuums up here, just simply because we have so much square footage. We make sure those vacuums have HEPA media filters on them to help slow down and stop that. And then, you know, just the basic cleaning and make sure people are doing it right. Because if all you're doing is moving the dust around again, it's not a good thing.
Good points. Gavin, have you ever been on one of those riding vacuum cleaners?
Have I? Well,
Yes.
I've seen a few, Jeff, but I know I've actually ridden them around myself. No, but I've seen a few. But
We're gonna have to get you on one.
What I'm seeing and hearing is positive but confusing. And again, I'm seeing people within the industry say, "Oh, I've got this, you know, equipment that now cleans the surface as well as it, you know, it helps decrease the amount of air pollutants in the air." And I think there's a lot of education and training that needs to be done. I'd like to go back to what I focused on before, Jeff. You know, certified indoor air quality professionals are required in the industry. We have some of them out there. We don't have enough. For sure. I do a lot of work with dental surgeries, and it's interesting. You look at all these sort of aerosol generating procedures they do, a dentist does. And all the dentists here in Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia that I work with have all gone out and they've bought those portable air filters, Jeff. And I know what they've bought, and I know I know where they bought them from. And yes, they're very effective at controlling airborne particles from either indoor or outdoor sources. But the challenge is no one actually bought them and said, this is the piece of equipment that fits the size of the room. And I said, well, you know, it's if you read the manual, which no one does, we don't do that anymore. But if you look at what the piece of equipment does, what's the size of your room? Does it fit? So it's really important, if you're going to invest, if you're going to spend money on equipment, then make sure that it's appropriate for what you're trying to clean. For example, the size of the room is really, really important. We're still here in, what are we, Jeff? November 2022, and we're still having really good deep dive academic discussions about HEPA filters, MERV filters, carbon-based filters. I want to get rid of. I just want that to. I want that to be taught, educated, trained. I want everyone to be. You know, where is the science right now? Where is the evidence to support what we should be doing without having to go back and talk about this? So it's really important that even, you know, the number of facilities that I've visited, you know, again within our ISSA GBAC STAR program, that have put in significant amounts of money. I would say improving mechanically ventilated systems. They've increased their MERV particle filter. They may have added carbon-based filters without any assessment, without any baseline. And I went to a conference recently, and they said, we're bringing in 80% of the air that you're breathing in this conference room comes from outside, and you're going to get 4 air exchanges per hour while you sit here during the conference. And people stood up and clapped and cheered, and I thought I was at a rock concert or something. It was just crazy. It's like, well, hang on, what was your baseline? What were you trying to fix? I'm in New York City. It's July. The outdoor air is really polluted in July. And you're bringing it into my meeting when I'm sitting there. And then they asked me to speak next about how wonderful that was. And I went, oh, yeah, I've got to, you know, keep the excitement going, be positive. But, you understand that, you know, with any MERV particle filter, as it gets dirty, it increases the load, it gets better. But if you bring in like a carbon filter, which, you know, those carbon filters are really good for taking out pollutants like volatile organic compounds. When a carbon filter gets saturated, Jeff, the VOCs pass straight through it. And that's a level that we're dealing with every day, but we don't have the training education in place to support that. So I'm seeing lots of facilities now buying cleaning equipment, vacuums with HEPA filters and other scrubbers and what have you. And then I'm seeing also facilities under our GBAC STAR program spend enormous amounts of money on their ventilation and filtration systems. Again, and I'm going to repeat this, without any baseline data, without any assessment, and then without any continual monitoring like we can do now in real time.
Mm-hmm. I would have loved to have been there for that speech you gave after they brought in all that air from outside, but we'll talk about it another time. Ron wants to comment.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that due diligence is important. If you're going to buy a piece of equipment, there you may have 5, 10 different options, but of those 5 or 10 options that you have, there may be one or two that will provide you with the data that you need to make a decision that will be the right piece of equipment for that particular area. So I'll give you just a real quick example. When HEPA filters first came out, uh, you could go out and you could buy a HEPA filter vacuum for $69, and it would be it'd have a HEPA filter in there, but it wasn't effective. So that's the same thing. Do your due diligence. Work with companies that will provide you with the documentation that they're making, that they're saying that they can do, and that will work with you in developing your program.
Appreciate that, Ron. Good information. Let's move on to our next topic. Let's just look at this, not comment on this. We'll go to our next slide, but we're going to talk about the HVAC system. And this picture, I think, is from Gavin's basement. Gavin, what would you think if you actually had that in your basement? What would you do?
Well, I'm very fortunate, Jeff. The kids spend most of the time in the basement, so yeah. But I am a responsible father, so I do care. Again, with a MERV particle filter, as we said, Jeff, as the load, as it gets dirty, it works better. Now, this was a carbon filter. As it saturates, as it gets more dirt, as it gets more dirtier, those VOCs will pass straight through it. So it's that understanding of what these filters can and can't do. But the challenge we have right now, Jeff, we do a lot of work at ISSA with the airlines, with their planes. We do a lot of work with buses and trains, public transportation. We do a lot of work with the airports, convention centers, and hotels. And what we find is that the big weakness in our education here is, when is this a potentially dangerous situation? When do you check the filters? You've spent money on them. You've put them into your mechanically ventilated systems, and we're finding that sort of sequence, that sort of frequency of checking is all over the place. It's not like, oh, I'm going to check it this week. It could be 3 months, 6 months, or it's when I feel like it, or when daylight saving changes back to change back to an hour. It's all these sort of things that don't really match the science behind the product, what we're trying to use, and what you actually spent money on. And I think it's so critical that we actually, again, going back to the training of air quality certified professionals, or indoor air quality certified professionals, we get back and say, right, hang on, guys, you can look at these things more than once every 6 months. And it's really important that if it's that dirty, then what was the air that I was breathing, or you were breathing, why that air was circulating through the mechanical ventilated system? It was pretty bad.
Absolutely.
And again, we know there's so much evidence about the health impact of poor air quality, and again, just on critical thinking, productivity, attention spans, also allergies, headaches, you name it, it's all there. The challenge we have is putting it in a way that everyone goes, oh, this is important. So we saw this come and go. Yep, HVAC is important, filters are important, but I still don't think we're there, Jeff. I don't think we're there in doing the best we can. This is like Ron said, our due diligence. Do we have a systems in place that can guarantee and maintain the healthy indoor space when it comes to air quality?
Yeah. Lisa says that's a filthy cold air return. We need a better made. And of course, she has a smiley face on her comment. Yeah, that's just a picture just to demonstrate. But I bet we've seen this in real life. I know I've seen it. So hopefully it doesn't happen too often. But let's just get a quick comment from you, Todd. What does this mean to you if you see dust? If you see, doesn't happen, does it?
Oh, I wished it didn't. I mean, unfortunately, usually when we see stuff like this, it's our custodial staff not doing what they should be doing, which we'd expect them to come through and vacuum these out on a regular basis. So it's not being pulled through the ventilation system. Stuff that's at ground lower level is usually always kept. It's the stuff that's in your ceilings where we notice there's a lot of ones missed because you've got to turn the vacuum upside down. And people think, oh, that's hard. but you put the proper tools on it, it's really not. And then we're eliminating that from the air and not putting it back into the buildings again.
Appreciate that. And Ron, I imagine a contractor may lose his account if he doesn't keep up with this situation.
Yeah, that's a red flag that goes up. But really, Gavin made a good point earlier that you got to find the source. I mean, you can clean all that out, but again, there may be contributing factors to that you can prevent. But yes, definitely a red flag.
All right. Well, I tell you what, let's go ahead and go right into our Q&A. So Martha, if you would go ahead and take down the slides so we can see everybody. The last couple of points we're going to cover with our questions. One of them is, how do we keep the momentum going? You know, you think about the pandemic and everyone's viewpoint of cleaning and disinfecting and indoor air quality. What do we do as cleaning professionals in our facilities? So Gavin, you want to start us off?
Oh, yes, Jeff. I think there's some really significant market opportunities for us here. The challenge of is that we're so passionate in the cleaning industry. We often make this a little bit more challenging or difficult than it really should be. Let's get out there. Let's get out there and get the baseline assessments done. Let's start measuring. Let's start, knowing that these devices that we all know are available, about the size of a smoke detector, should be in more places than they are now. And let's help the facilities that we work in, that we clean every day, understand how important indoor air quality is. And let's work to get those initial assessments done. And then we work as a team to work out how to come up with the solutions for whatever results you find.
Thinking about the momentum, Todd, I imagine you work on a budget. Any challenges there with convincing that you need more dollars?
Unfortunately, yes, all the time. You have a certain amount of money, you can only do a certain amount of things. But, you try to look at where do we need to push more money, and then making people understand why you need to do that. As I think of this, I think of perhaps one of the biggest filters in a building, your carpet. I hear all the time, oh, you don't need to clean that carpet on a regular basis. Well, actually we do, because if not only does the carpet wear out sooner, but it's collecting pollutants inside of it. I've had people, come say, well, don't clean my carpet because I might have asthma. Well, it's a better reason to clean your carpet, because now your carpet's catching those pollutions and not putting them back where you can breathe. So, there's a lot of it's just making people understand why we do it and what we need to do, I think.
Good point. And Ron, how about from your perspective with the contractors?
Well, I think it's very important to build off the momentum that has been built up through COVID-19. And some of the things that always prevent contractors sometimes from talking to their customers is price. But now more than ever, as we mentioned earlier, the customer is looking at the BSC a lot differently because you've got them through COVID-19. So now when we talk about some of the programs that we want to present to make their building healthier, it's a little bit different. An example, I've been in numerous meetings where there have been the facility representatives, the finance representatives, and the risk management and safety segment of companies. And risk management is at the top of the list. And so now as service providers, keep those people in mind. So the finance people are always going to be concerned about money. But now the people that you have to convince are the risk management people. Normally companies have meetings off-site. I've sat in meetings with the salespeople at the hotels, the meeting representative for the company, and now the third member sitting at the table is the risk management person. And they are the ones that have the weight. So as BSCs, develop your program, sell the program, and really concentrate on demonstrating the value that you are going to bring to your customer.
All right. April asked the very first question about perfumes and air purifiers, air fresheners. So I know we talked about that a bit, but anything more to add to that? And maybe Todd, we'll start with you. What if those in your buildings want them? What if they believe in them? What do you do?
Well, first of all, I hate air fresheners and those type of things because it means we're trying to cover up an odor usually. And so we got to identify what the odor is, where it's coming from first. And if we can remove that odor, then there's usually less need for air fresheners. However, you have those people that absolutely have to have them, you know, and when we run into that, it's like, well, first of all, let's stop the problem. And then if you want the air freshener, let's use it to just be a nice scent in the room and not something to cover up an odor. And so that's usually how we try to work. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen. Sometimes you have the smell of dead things, like, you know, stuff that's been thrown in the trash with cherry scent or something. And it's just not a good thing. And so again, we have to, you know, solve the problem.
Maybe some nice flowers on a desk would be the best scent if you need one.
Yes, most certainly. I believe it is. So.
All right. Gavin, what do you think? Anything more to add about this? I know we all agree, I think, on the topic about these air fresheners and artificial scents, but more?
Oh, I think, Jeff, there's been so much discussion and argument and conversation about, you know, the role of air in infectious diseases, which is what I specialize in. And the point I'm trying to make is that, okay, you can't see a lot of the things that the indoor air pollutants, you can't see them. They're invisible. So with our detectors, we can make them visible. But if you're in a room and you can smell an odor, that's particles. That's particles in the air. And it helps people understand that viruses and bacteria and mold and fungus can all spread just like that as well. So people don't realize what you're smelling is actually small particles in the air that's floating through the air. So it's for me, it's always a good education. If you can smell it, then you're probably getting exposed to bacteria and germs and viruses at the same time. And people go, oh, really? Yeah, because that's how you smell. That's how you detect these odors. So I find it's a really good learning tool to help people understand the value of good indoor air quality. If I use odors, and then I can then extrapolate that information and say, well, that's how it works for germs, viruses, and bacteria and molds and stuff. You know, you can't see them as well. So again, we've built the indoor space, Jeff, anywhere to be comfortable. We want it to smell good, but I'm hoping, I'm fingers crossed that we are going back to actually better measurement, better metrics, and better science. Yes.
Maybe we could compare it to water. The best water, some say, is water that has no flavor. Maybe the best air to breathe is that has no scent, but that's just me. Ron, anything to add to that before we do another question?
Yeah, if you go back to when green products were starting to be transitioned, it was not unusual for people to say, after having the transition to green, to come out of a bathroom, a restroom, and say, you know, it used to smell clean before, but it was a perfect opportunity for someone to educate them. And you say, you know, those things you used to smell were the things that were killing you. And now the appearance isn't there. And I think it's education. You know, that's a big part of it. But, you know, you could smell all you want. Bleach smells. You know, my mother used to use bleach. It's a wonder we survived. But if it didn't smell and it didn't cause our eyes to burn, then she didn't think it was clean. So we need to educate people. It's just as clean, it's sanitized, it's disinfected.
Well, Ron, we're glad you're still with us.
Me too.
And Todd, from a practical aspect, anything more to add to that?
Not really. I think Ron hit it pretty well right on the head. You know, where possible, use safer, cleaner chemicals and use the ones that aren't as toxic to us as the people doing the work.
Yeah, good point. Our next question from folks on our webinar is, how do you meet indoor air requirements if you do not have control of building systems such as filtration and HVAC? I'm not sure who should take this one. Any volunteers? Or I'll pick somebody.
But just on that,
go ahead.
I think that really segues very nicely to some of the work that you and I and others at ISSA are doing right now, Jeff. You know, as I said, there's billions of federal dollars out there in pandemic funding that was supposed to be appropriated and spent on indoor air quality, and it wasn't. And If people on this call don't know, but what ISSA is working right now, the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, has a request for information, an RFI out that's due December 5th. We want to, I know we didn't get in a tsunami last week, but we want to send a tsunami to the federal government and give them ideas on solutions when it comes to improving indoor air quality. So it's called the Indoor Air Quality Challenge. It's due on December 5th. I know ISSA is going to be making a submission. We also are encouraging all of our members to make submissions. So if you need more information, contact Jeff and myself. We'll send it out. We want to ensure that everyone sends in the same clear, concise messages on the need for monitoring more indoor air quality, the need for more training, education, and we just hit them with the same messages and go, oh, hopefully that'll lead to better programs in 2023 when they need to spend that money.
All right. Good points. And yeah, we all want to team up and help with that. Ron or Todd, anything to add to that? Ron? Okay.
Nope.
Todd?
Well done.
No, not much I can add to that.
All right. We are saving time. Thanks, Gavin. Appreciate it. Here's another question. This is more of an equipment question. Should auto scrubbers and extractors have HEPA filtration? Maybe Todd, what do you think of that if you had to do that with your equipment?
Well, putting a HEPA filter on a auto scrubber, which is using water to pick up stuff, is probably detrimental to the machine because the first time moisture is pulled at that filter, it's ruined. But making sure you're using water to pick up the stuff. You know, don't be driving it down the thing without water going down onto your floor at the surface, because the water will surround the dirt and not allow it to be aerolized. At the vacuum, most certainly, any type of vacuum I'm using, I'll make sure there's some sort of filtration in there. The more, the better, in my opinion.
And Ron, when you talk to your clients, your contractors, is HEPA a big deal? Is that part of the proposal? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The one thing to consider too is that the customer of the BSC is now a different type of customer than it was 5 years. They were 5 years ago. They know more about our business sometimes than we do. So because of the internet and all the information available, so it's at the top of the list.
Okay. Gavin probably doesn't know what a HEPA filter is, but let's see if he has anything to add.
No, I think it's important that we look at HEPA filters, we look at MERV filters, we look at carbon-based filters. I'll go back, Jeff, a bit of education, a bit of training, help people understand what those different filters can and can't do, but more importantly, make it part of our system, our culture, that we frequently check them, we monitor them, we look at them, we know what ratings we can put in. I've seen so many facilities. I'll go, we're going to go from a MERV 7 to a MERV 14 because someone told us to do that. Well, your system wasn't built for a MERV 14, so don't even do it. I've seen so many of those mistakes made over the last 2 years. Let's stop all that and let's get back to focusing on the science and understanding what will work and what we can and can't do in the spaces that we built years ago.
Appreciate that, Gavin. And I was kidding. I know you know what a HEPA filter is, and you believe in them. Here's another question about air purifiers. Are they a good idea? And then specifically those that use photocatalytic oxidation, photoelectrochemical oxidation, or bipolar ionization. And boy, I don't know much about that stuff. What do you think? Gavin, do you know much about that?
Oh, I know a little bit, Jeff. I think that the technologies we have now in 2022 are really exciting. Unfortunately, and they work, but they work in the lab. And unfortunately, there hasn't been enough funding or even time to do what I call implementation research in the real world, to see whether we can take those technologies and put them into different size, different types of indoor built environments. And that's really the next step. So again, love the technology that we've got ready. A lot of it's come from the lab based on lab results, but wouldn't it be great if we had actual funding and time and people that could spend more time on doing real world operational research? And that's what's needed.
Okay. Ron, what about you? Anything to add to that?
Couldn't possibly.
Okay. And Todd?
No, my knowledge is so limited in this area. I trust people like Ron to let us know.
But you're going to do the work.
Well,
don't ask me. You're in bad shape if you ask me. Ask Gavin.
Yeah, exactly, Gavin. That's what I meant to say.
Let's wrap it up with this final point, and you can all comment on this. For those on the webinar, as they go about their work after this, next few days, months, and whatever, what are some important things to look for? Contamination issues, improvement issues. What are the top of mind items they should look for? And Gavin, let's start with you on that. Then we'll go to Ron and wrap it up with Todd.
Oh, that simple question. I've walked into a space, and what's the air quality like? Do you measure it? No, you don't. Well, why don't you? Because you can, and be able to then explain to them, being good citizens from the cleaning industry, this is how you measure it. And then once you get those results, we'll help you come up with solutions.
Good point. And Ron, how about you? What's the big picture for you?
Well, I think as I've mentioned a couple of times, the BSCs now are viewed as experts. And I would encourage those BSCs to leverage the view that their customers and potential customers have towards our industry, and do the research. There's so much technology coming out every day, and build a good sustainability team made up of vendors and manufacturers and organizations like yours.
Thank you. And Todd, what would you tell those asking you that question? What's the big picture for indoor air quality for facilities?
For us, it's probably going back to what Gavin originally said, is to identify the source and eliminate that source, or do something to mitigate it anyhow, so it's not as bad. That's basically what I would look at, because again, we deal with mostly visual and smell.
Appreciate that. Well, folks, we are going over time, and those that everyone stayed with us to the very end, we appreciate that. Gavin in the chat put his email, GAVINMS@ISSA.com, Gavin MS, for the comments he would like to get from those who would like to contribute. So just follow up with Gavin and you'll get a response back. Gavin is good at answering emails, so you will get a response if you send that note. But we do thank everyone for being here. Everyone and those that registered will get a copy of this recording in a few days, and it'll also be posted on CMM Online /resources/videos. But thank you for being here.